You know, it was back in 1931, Bill 98 was passed, and that allowed for casinos in Nevada. That same year, 1931, Hockey Night in Canada debuted on radio in November of that year. So there you have in the Dominion of Canada and in the Mojave Desert, suddenly this oasis for gamers. And that brings us to the man whose idea it was to bring hockey to Nevada, Gary Bettman, Commissioner of the NHL. Congrats.
Well, thank you. By the way, I heard you were in the casino with this, trying to put it on black at the roulette table.
I went red. I went red for cherry.
Okay. How are you?
Thank you for having it here. The Stanley Cup, I was saying to you, 25 years ago, you presented at the Montreal Forum. So a thought on that and just this.
You and I have been doing this a long time. A couple of breaks in between, but for the most part.
Well, you said your daughter was 4, right?
Yeah. My youngest, who had her first child in January, was 4 years old when I started this.
Well, I mean, I said to you, 71, Ken Dryden and the Montreal Canadiens beat Bobby Orr in the opening round, then they beat Bobby Hull in the final, and that was for me the most exciting. Dick Irvin says this, Bob Cole says it, the greatest final ever. But this year is magical, Gary, and this is all part of the Golden Knights.
This is all about sports at its essence. Unpredictability. It's why we play the games. Nobody thought the Golden Knights were going to be this good. It couldn't have been predicted. I went back in the last few days and looked at the quotes right after the expansion draft at the beginning of the season, the preseason prognostications, and everybody said this team was going to be terrible. But you put a group of people together who obviously have a chemistry. They all felt no matter who they played, at least one of them had something to prove. And then there's the tragedy of October 1st, which, you know, Vegas strong became a rallying cry, and this team was at the center of healing and unity, and I actually think the players believe they've been playing for a higher purpose.
It's been great for the National Hockey League, great for the game. What about Seattle seeing this? Are you going back to them and saying, wait a minute, 650, that's not enough?
Well, yeah, I could try that, but first of all, we haven't made a decision yet on Seattle. We're involved in the process. But their expectation is twofold. One, the terms of the expansion draft will be the same. And two, that the price will be $650 million, U.S.
Okay. Going back, I remember in '94 you won a Sports Lawyers Association award. Remember that?
Yes.
You and Jay Moyers. And that, believe it or not, was at a time when you and he were kind of championing the idea of no gambling, because if you have gambling on sports, it could be a very bad thing. And now suddenly you have the Supreme Court as rule.
The times have changed. The award that you're referring to was because of the work that Jay, who was then the general counsel of the NFL, and while I was already here at the NHL, it was for the work I did at the NBA and helping to get PASPA, which was the legislation that the U.S. Supreme Court just overturned, passed through Congress. And the issue is actually eerily similar to where we are now. At that time, in the early 90s, when PASPA was passed, a lot of states were having economic issues and were looking for new sources of revenue. And a lot of them started considering sports betting. And we were concerned about sports betting in general and the consistency or inconsistency between states. Now, whether or not I think sports betting's a good idea or not in the United States, it's a reality based on the Supreme Court's decision. And what we're concerned about is consistency from state to state. We want to understand that there are a uniform set of rules, types of bets that can be placed, what kind of data can be used, and on and on and on. A series of issues, including the allocation, if you will, or the appropriation by betting sources of our intellectual property, our trademarks, our logos, and the very games that we put on every night.
It's an incredible story. Like you mentioned data. There'll be such a need for data. Player tracking you'll do, puck tracking you'll do, so people will be betting
we're not
on.
Just going to give it away.
Okay.
We own that.
So that's good.
It's good, and that's why this is going to have to evolve over time. It's not going to be simple, but I think all of the sports leagues are of a view that we need consistency. We can't vary from state to state. You know, us being in Nevada with the Golden Knights, that was just a small, if you will, sampling of having a team where sports betting is. That's not where most of the sports betting has been taking place, legally or illegally, around the world. And so everybody's going to have to figure this out, and I think it's going to go through a lot of twists and turns before it finds its equilibrium.
Well, you're the right guy for that. So congratulations, Gary, on the Knights. As I say, it's quite a story, and your 25th Stanley Cup. Oh, gosh. Don Cherry, it's made for Don, right? If there's Wayne Newton incarnate, it's Don.